The Condemned games are classics in the horror genre of video games. Criminal Origins was a cornerstone in building tension and fear through the environment and atmosphere alone. But what is often understated about the games is the fantastic lineup of characters, from Ethan to Rosa to Malcolm and plenty of others, but one individual stands out the most: the primary antagonist in the first game and a terrifying presence in the second game. The monster known as Serial Killer X is one of the best characters in the Condemned duology. There will be spoilers ahead for Condemned Criminal Origins and Condemned 2 Bloodshot.
Over there!
Leland Van Horn, or as I like to call him, Serial Killer X, or SKX for cutesies, is one of the handful of recurring characters in both Condemned games. He is the nephew of Malcolm Van Horn, another character who appears in both games, even if his presence in the second game is primarily post-mortem. Other than his relation to his uncle, not much is known about Leland, other than Malcolm saying that he was once a good boy. There is a wave of paranormal auras all over Metro City that cause violence and aggression to many of the population, and Leland is a victim to this. He tries to find a positive outlet for his violence, and his solution is to kill bad people, serial killers to be exact. Since this mysterious wave of violence has been plaguing the city, there is no shortage of serial killers in such a small area. He decides to stalk an FBI agent named Ethan Thomas to find out which killers that he's hunting and kill them before he can capture them. He is known to the player as the serial killer who kills other serial killers. He hunts them down in parallel to the FBI and kills them in the way that they killed their victims, a vigilante of sorts. But he is in no way a good guy or an anti-hero. He is quick to kill anyone that gets in his way, including law enforcement and even his own family. Between the two games, like most of the characters, there was a drastic change in SKX's appearance. In Criminal Origin, he has long, unkempt brown hair with some facial hair to boot, with a few different outfits depending on where he is and whether or not he needs to fit in, like a janitor's jumpsuit in an office building or some jeans and a green jacket at an apple orchard. However, in the sequel, he appears quite different. Due to the events at the ending of the first game, he now has a large gunshot wound to his face, and he also has the letter X carved into his forehead in combination with shaving off all of his hair on his head and face. As far as his body goes, he's definitely packed on some muscle, and now he has some tattoos covering a lot of his body, mostly going shirtless in the game save for a ominous butcher's apron, a much more terrifying presence in the second game to be sure. Our introduction to Leland actually came before the first game even came out. A 6-part online point-and-click game released as promotion to Condemned Criminal Origins that introduced the audience to the vibe of the game as well as its primary villain. You play as a character named Agent Mallory on the hunt for a serial killer known as the Bone Cutter, a killer who's known for cutting out the organs of his victims and labeling them for police to find. One of the more graphic killers in Metro City, and one that SKX becomes fond of, even deciding to use the Bone Cutter's methods of killing on Ethan in the closing chapter of Criminal Origins.
Or maybe the Bone Cutter neatly dissected the body, removed the internal organs, and labeled them for the police to find. Oh, yes, he was one of mine too. We were so close to him, but I got there first.
Anyway, Agent Mallory is on the hunt for the Bone Cutter, and he is getting close too. He finds out the killer's name is Christopher Vine, and he hunts him down to an abandoned building before coming across a dead body there, the body of Christopher Vine, the suspected Bone Cutter, before he's ambushed from behind by another man who beats him to death with a 2x4. There's no telling how many non-serial killers SKX has killed, but Agent Mallory is the first that we know of. As far as named serial killers that he's killed, we have a brief list based on the killers that Ethan's been hunting, but are now crossed off his list because they've been killed, including the Bone Cutter, the Roadside Carver, whose MO is a swift throat slice, the Polaroid Killer, who kills his victims and then photographs them with Polaroids, I assume, the Dumpster Strangler, the Window Washer, the Crescent Moon Killer, and the Lunar Tick Slasher. Not much is known about any of them, just simply names on a list, but Leland has killed them all. In Criminal Origins, you play the game as Ethan Thomas, an FBI detective investigating serial killers in Metro City. At the opening of the game, he is going after a killer named the Matchmaker, a killer known for murdering young women and then posing their bodies with male mannequins, usually with the mannequins having disfigured faces. Ethan shows up to the crime scene of the Matchmaker's latest victim. While investigating, he smells cigarette smoke, and since no one in the area with him is smoking, he assumes that the Matchmaker is still around, so he searches the building. However, it's not the Matchmaker that he finds, but instead it is Serial Killer X, trying to gain some information on the Matchmaker himself to hunt him down and kill him. He eventually confronts Ethan, stealing his duty weapon, but instead of killing him, as that is his source of intel on serial killers, he instead kills his two partners, framing Ethan for the crime, claiming that he and Ethan are on the same path of righteousness.
Mess this up for us. We are both on the same path of righteousness.
Ethan is forced to go rogue, and with some aid from a friend in the bureau named Rosa, he hunts down the Matchmaker independently, of course at this point thinking that Leland is the Matchmaker still. He soon learns that Leland has been spying on him for months through the window of his apartment, explaining how he has so much information on the killers. It is not until finding the Matchmaker's body, killed in the same way that he killed all of his victims, that it is known that Leland is not the Matchmaker, but in fact is a killer that is hunting serial killers, a Serial Killer X. So at this point, SKX has killed 8 out of the 9 serial killers that Ethan has been hunting, with only one killer left on the list being the Torturer, so he knows that that's his next target. Ethan and Rosa deduce that the Torturer is a man named Carl Anderson. The MO of this Torturer is the fact that he never actually kills anyone himself. He simply tortures his victims to the point at which they'd rather commit suicide than live through the torture any longer. Turns out Anderson turned the abandoned school he attended into his hideout, and a former PE teacher named Samuel Tibbetts leaked Anderson's information to the news as he suspected that he was the torturer. Anyway, SKX and Ethan know that Anderson is the torturer and that he is at the local school, so that's where they head to. Unfortunately, once Ethan gets there, he just finds a near-death Tibbetts that scares him near to death himself.
Help me.
Tibbetts reveals to Ethan that an unknown man knocked Anderson out and took him away, so Serial Killer X is one step ahead once again. Ethan and Rosa find out that Serial Killer X took Anderson to an apple orchard, where Ethan finds Anderson dead from self-impalement. He committed suicide like he forced all of his victims to do before. From here, Ethan plays dead as the torturer and lays in wait for Serial Killer X to confront him. But before Ethan can finish the job, Malcolm Van Horn shows up and knocks Ethan out. Ethan wakes up to find Serial Killer X has tied him up. He confesses his whole master plan and takes credit for all the serial killers that he has slain, before deciding to kill Ethan for getting in his way too much, starting by cutting off one of his fingers. Before he can cut off anything more, Malcolm takes him out and tells Ethan to go destroy the evil entity in the barn, but we aren't discussing that can of worms here. After all that hubbub, Malcolm and Ethan leave the barn, but it's soon discovered that Serial Killer X is in the trunk of the car. Malcolm still wants to save him as he is his nephew and all, but as the argument on the road proceeds, it ultimately ends in Serial Killer X getting a shot to the face, either by himself or by Ethan, depending on the actions of the player, even though the outcome is the same either way. So that's that. Serial Killer X ends up slain in the trunk of his uncle's car. Or does he? Well, of course not. I already said that he was in the sequel. Very little is known of what exactly happened to Leland after getting shot in the face. All we find out in the sequel is that Malcolm brought him to an abandoned lodge to nurse him back to health. Unfortunately, as he was healing in solitude, he also became obsessed with this cult of the Oro, leading to the events of the second game. In the second game, while you don't know it off the bat, Serial Killer X has murdered his uncle, Malcolm Van Horn. And not just a normal little murder either, he flays him open like a spatchcocked chicken. In this game, instead of hunting serial killers, he is hunting members of the secret cult society called the Oro. And his first victim is his own uncle. He also goes on in the game to kill the mayor of Metro City, Rachel Mars, also in gruesome fashion, as well as the director of the FBI's serial crime unit, Ike Farrell. Well, in the end, it's Ethan who actually kills Ike, but Serial Killer X did a bunch of dissecting on him first. Ethan does not know that it's Serial Killer X for the majority of the game, but he finds out in time, and it doesn't help when he does get a glimpse of a killer in action that looks nothing like Leland from the first game. This dude bulked up. So anyways, Serial Killer X is killing all these members of the Oro to find out how they work. These members have implants in them that give them powers, and he's discovering the pieces to it all on his own. He even implants some homeless people with metal pieces and has them fight to the death in the school's gym to learn more about their abilities. When Ethan actually meets Serial Killer X for the first time in this game, he is jacked, shirtless, and has a hole in the side of his face from the gunshot wound in the first game. He comes off as sort of an ally as he opposes the Oro as much as Ethan does, or at least it seems that way, but this is the last time you see Serial Killer X in the game after he stabs a couple cops in the head. Ethan goes on to fight the Oro and his own demons, but Serial Killer X just kind of fucks off camera to do whatever he wants. There is a post-credits scene to the game though, and it shows members of the Oro crowding over Leland, laying on a table, receiving metal implants of his own, seemingly joining the Oro and becoming even more powerful than he already was. And this sets up a potential badass third entry into the series, but as we all know, we never see a third Condemned game. His involvement was important, but also not really vital in the second game. He is the reason 3 major characters are dead, but that's about it. But that does add to his pretty impressive kill list overall. His confirmed kills in the first game are the Matchmaker, the Torturer, Detective Dickinson, and Officer Becker. In the second game, his victims are Malcolm Van Horn, Rachel Mars, and a bunch of SCU officers. And outside of gameplay, he has killed all the named killers before on the list, you know, like the Polaroid Killer and all those guys. I'm not going to list them again. And also Agent Mallory from the prequel game. And that's about 20 people all said and done. And as far as we know, he isn't done yet. He's still alive, probably wreaking havoc on people. I mean, in the second game, he was also implanting homeless people to have them fight to the death with weird augments and implantations. So who knows how many of them died at his hand as well. He's got a lot going for him. Dude's almost got a tactical nuke kill streak. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that Ethan has killed triple-digit people between the 2 games, so he still has nothing on our homeboy. Throughout my playthrough of the first game, one of the main comparisons to Serial Killer X in my mind was Dexter Morgan from the show Dexter. They both act as sort of a vigilante serial killer. They both have urges to kill, but want to do something good with those urges, so they go after other serial killers. They both work very closely with law enforcement. SKX stalks the FBI, while Dexter is a criminal pathologist for the police himself, and he also has a sister who is a cop. And both of them eventually kill innocent people to keep themselves from getting caught as well. Definitely something that I saw similarities to. The second game has no similarities to Dexter though. That's just kind of thrown out the window. But really, that's all the information that I have on good old SKX. I really wish there was more. I went into this video hoping that I would find some really cool information and tidbits on him, but there's just not much out there. I'm sure there is a bunch of information on like sketchbooks and idea logs from the writers of these games, because there was several sequels to the Condemned games planned out that will probably never see the light of day, and it's a shame because he is such a cool character. And it's been a while since I've done one of these lore type videos, so just let me know how you like them. And as always, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I want to give a shout out to my supporters on Patreon. D. Schwinn, Kid Kingpin, Not Much, Doug Smith, Anonymous Starkweather, Sofa Pals Productions, Crash Bandicoot 25, Zachary Parkerson, Ben Stevens, Ice Ham Jello, Grand Taquito, and Yay Man. And my YouTube members, THC Grey Wolf, Grizzly Wisley, Just Someone, Daniel Thor D Easy, and Diogo Brito. As always, I hope to see you next time. Peace.